Doug, we've talked a bit about the remoteness of the Kwai River Christian Hospital. To give our listeners a little better idea what the practical implications of that were, could you tell us about a typical trip from Bangkok to the Kwai River Christian Hospital?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think in terms of contrast with what your experiences were. We had no road access to the river. The most reasonable way to get to the Kwai River, which is really in the Thai name, Manam Kwai Noi, which is the small branch of the downriver, which is called what? I've forgotten. From Kanchanaburi down.
I think it's the Mekong
River. Yeah. Because the big branch is going up way up north. On the other side of the mountain range, we went into on the Kwai Noi. But anyway, there was a train we could get into on the Thonburi side of Bangkok and get to a little town called Wang Po, which is right on was the end of the rail line.
About how long did that train
That
trip
would
take?
take 6 or 8 hours. So that was the first day, and there was a little hotel in Wang Po where we stayed multiple times with family, with kids, with guests, and it was a pretty typical Thai hotel with mats and you slept on and all. There was a restaurant we ate in, and from there we could load into hangyao boats, the long-tail boats. In the heavy rain season, when we moved up after coming back from furlough in '63, we loaded there with large rice barges going upriver, and we took a lot of equipment up, and by that time 5 kids, and that was quite a trip. But the typical dry weather season, and there were always 2 or 3 months on either side. This would be the driest season would be like from December, January, February, March. The rains began in usually August, and the heavy rain season was August, September, October. Well, anyway, our trip then would begin a day by train to Wang Po, spending the night, getting in a hangyao boat. If it was a really dry season, the hangyao boats didn't go well beyond the main stop village was Takanun, and we had gotten acquainted with a Chinese merchant up in the village who was very welcoming to us, staying there in his home, and we'd eat in a little restaurant there. And then if it was a really dry season, we had our village Land Rover, our mission Land Rover would meet us, or he had left it there. We'd pick it up and then drive from there to the mission. So that would be 1 day by boat to Takanun, and then a second day by Land Rover to the mission. Or if there was a transition, there's enough water, we could also have a hangyao boat take us right to the mission station, which is probably the jeep ride from Takanun to Sangklaveri was really problematic because there was not a road. We were usually going on roadways that were developed by large logging trucks that travel from village to village and access the river in places. And if there was not a bridge, you went down one side and up the other, or if you're luckier, there was 2 logs across that little creek, and you'd have somebody get out of the jeep and get over on the other side and guide you as you got one wheel on each log and go across. And it had a couple of spots like that. But I remember one event I think I talked to you about. We were coming back from, had the family, and we had a stack of eggs, about 10 or 12 big containers of eggs, and kids in the back. And the Land Rover, in the tropics, you don't keep the top on, and you don't run with air conditioning. It's just too hot to run with it. So the issue of rolling over was a real hazard. And we had a driver, and he was going down the gully to go up this other side, and he had to goose it to go up the other side, and the engine died, and he back into the stream bed really hard, and the Jeep flipped over, and off went the eggs and off the kids, and luckily nobody was hurt, and we saved most of the eggs. But those kind of events were memorable about getting back and forth, and so you didn't do many trips. Well, one thing I might talk about, because this has come up and it's interesting, with the communication from Roy Myers, that I think, I'm not even sure you've read yet, but it's in the last couple of days. He responded to our conversation about an infamous Rogue River jet boat.
Yes.
I should remember that. I should mention that, because that was one of my not very good ideas. But I'm a fly fisherman, and I love the Rogue River, which is in southern Oregon, and it's been made famous by Zane Grey, who had a remote campsite there and lived there and wrote about the Wild West out of there, and people know about the Rogue River thanks to him. But they also have jet boats that were early on in the days I was looking at it, the outboard jets and jet pumps to drive river boats were just getting going. They're very popular now all over the West. You see them. The jets have greatly improved. But I felt that was the perfect answer, that the hospital needed to have one of those Rogue River jet boats. They were plywood boats. The one I ordered was 16 or 18 feet long. I think it was 18 feet. It had an inboard engine, great big inboard engine with a Berkeley pump that worked beautifully. It was just like the model, but it's a little bit smaller than the ones they run down there with tourists going upstream for the ride. Well, I used mission money, and we got that boat and had it shipped to Bangkok, and got it on the Kauai River, and it worked beautifully. The trouble was, it also used so much gas that I could not keep gas enough to get to the hospital and back. So I had to store gas in 55-gallon drums and find out where, based on the distance I could go with that boat, where I kept the gasoline, and I would leave gas with who I thought was a trusted friend, and then we would use the boat in and around the mission. But if we had a long run, we'd go back down, and when we got to the barrel where we were going to fill the gas tank again, it had turned into water somehow. Somebody had stolen the gasoline, and had never solved the issue of how to keep gas safely to supply this boat. And we ended up using it less and less, and it ended up being sitting there. And I just heard from Roy Myers, who was the physician that immediately followed me, who you know, because he's gone back multiple times to help at the Kauai River Hospital. But he said, I was the one that found that boat tied up at the mission, and I realized it was not going to be useful. He said, I found somebody in the U.S. Army who was delighted to have it, and they took it to Bangkok, and he said they were running VIPs around Bangkok and going up the Klong and stuff with my boat. So that's the saga of the Rogue River riverboat. And I offered in my email to invite to have you and Roy come with me on a ride up a jet boat. You can still do that today.
That would be fun. You mentioned earlier doing operations and taking x-rays. What did you do for electric power?
Oh, yeah. Well, our first major generator was a 2-cylinder Lister British generator. It was, that outset worked beautifully, and we were able to wire power to the whole mission, and I don't remember the voltage. What's the term? Kilovoltage that we
kilowatt
kilowatts that we generated. But we had strict times, as you did, certain times of the day. We ended up usually it's in the evening when we had electricity that we were able to share with the whole mission, and that was the power we used for the hospital. And if we had emergency surgery or need for an X-ray, that power plant we could turn on and use it for our needs.
Was that a hand cranked starter?
It was, and it took a lot of maintenance. You and I were talking about not being trained in medicine to take care of the medical, the multiple. I had 13 pieces of mechanical equipment that I was taking care of. I counted one time, including we had a 50 horsepower, 45 horsepower, gas outboard motor on an aluminum pram.